Thanks, friends. Cryptodamus back here again with another video, trying to get in the habit of doing some regularly scheduled weekly videos or at least a couple times a month. There's a lot going on right now, and I wanted to do a follow-up to my video from last week, which was on the Neptune Aries ingress. So if you want to go back to that video I posted last week, we talked about Neptune going into Aries for the first time in 165 years. This is an aspect that correlated very closely with the start of the American Civil War. We also talked about going all the way back to Neptune's Aries ingress in 1533, which correlated to King Henry VIII's battle with Pope Clement VII and the rise of the Protestant Reformation and people starting to question the authority of the Catholic Church and question the authority of the Pope in Rome. Nobody had ever done that in the way that King Henry VIII did. And it was a world-changing event. The Civil War, obviously, it was a historic world-changing event. And now we have Neptune going into Aries. This is also a world-changing event. And we can see the events of the last week or two with Trump's economic plan to sort of realign global trade. Some would say a disastrous economic plan to realign global trade. And he's implementing these tariffs across the board on all our trading partners. It's thrown the global markets and the global economy into a wild, chaotic period. So, it's worth looking back to try to understand what's going on here. But what I realized after doing the video last week was that the story is much more complex. It's not just an ingress of Neptune into Aries, which would be a 165-year event. It's also going to be coming up here in May is that Saturn is going to make that ingress into Aries. That's a 29-year zodiac reset for Saturn. That's a 29-year cycle. But not only that, Saturn and Neptune are going to make their historic 35-year cycle conjunction this summer and going all the way into next year. Okay, so what I realized is that this is a very unique moment in history that kind of has no parallel in any recent history that we could go back and look at because it's the overlapping of the 165-year Neptune cycle through the zodiac. So Neptune resetting the zodiac at zero Aries. The Saturn 29-year cycle, Saturn resetting at 0 degrees Aries. And it's also the 35-year Neptune it's also the 35-year Saturn Neptune conjunction cycle. Okay. So it's the overlapping of these three cycles right at the 0 degrees Aries point, or at least the first couple of degrees of Aries. And there's that hasn't happened in any time in human history that we can really go back and look at, making this a kind of a unique moment and an uncharted territory in some ways. So what we can do is break down each piece, by piece, which is what I started to do last week, excuse me, going back, and looking at, hang on a second here. Yeah, going back and looking at some of these historical events, right? So now we're gonna talk about a couple of different events uh, of the upcoming Saturn Neptune conjunction, right? So first of all, let's take a look at this. We're going to look at a couple of different pages that I've selected here. I'm going to share my screen with you here. And if we go into May of 2025, the one thing that I want to look at down here is Saturn's ingress into Aries, which takes place around May 25th. Okay, that's going to be also a big new epic reset as Saturn crosses from the last sign Pisces into the first sign Aries. This hasn't happened in 29 years. I think it was 1996 was the last time that this happened. And so this is a somewhat regular historical event. The time before 1996, and then the time before that would have been in the mid 1960s. Okay, so none of those had the super epic, dramatic, shifts that Neptune going into Aries has, because that's a much bigger cycle. That's that 165-year historic reset of the zodiac. Uh, okay, so then if we jump ahead here, we go into this is set for June 17th of 2025. Now you've got Saturn approaching that conjunction to Neptune from 1 to 2 degrees Aries. But not only that, Jupiter will have ingressed into Cancer at that point, and it will be making the square between Saturn and Neptune, exaggerating, activating and exaggerating this Saturn Neptune conjunction. So, what's up with the Saturn Neptune conjunction and why is that so important? Well, that, as we said, happens roughly about every 35 years or so. The last one was 1988, 1990, 1988, 1989. And what happened during that time was not the Russian Revolution, but the fall of the Berlin Wall. So that was an epic historical event. And that conjunction took place in the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn rules walls and boundaries. Saturn rules walls and boundaries. And Neptune has that dissolving effect on Saturn. Things that we took to be stable and solid get easily broken down and dissolved by the energy of Neptune. This can also be a crushing, broken dreams where Saturn, puts a harsh reality on the dreams and the bigger picture visions of Neptune. We may have saw that as this was the beginning of the end of the Soviet Union and led to a lot of suffering inside Russia. However, for Germany, German reunification, this was a dream come true. So, this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, as we said, the previous one was 1988, 1989, and correlates to major historical events that brought also changed the course of history. The beginning of the end of the Soviet Union. It took a few years later for it to totally collapse, okay? But this was the start, right? The Chairman Gorbachev had initiated this program of glasnost and perestroika, openness and restructuring. But it actually led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So that was an epic period of history. Now, the one before that, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction was 1952, 1953. That had some pretty major historical events like the death of Joseph Stalin and a power struggle inside of Soviet Russia. It was also a time of McCarthyism, okay, where we had a sort of paranoid Red Scare trying to root out communists within our government. And it all turned out to be, a lot of it was based on false information and innuendo and rumors, and a lot of it was based on lies. And Joseph McCarthy, Senator McCarthy, at that time had become one of the most powerful figures in America. But once the Saturn-Neptune conjunction sort of dissipated, he was exposed to be the criminal and the con man that he was. We might be seeing a similar parallel happening right now. I'm not going to mention anyone by name, but this time is reminiscent of the McCarthy era, okay, in American politics, which is one of the most which was actually one of the most terrible periods of in American politics in the 20th century. However, if we go back one more Saturn-Neptune cycle, that takes us to 1917, which was the end of World War I, but it was also the beginning of the Russian Revolution and the start of the Soviet period and the start of communism in Russia, deposing the monarchy of the Tsar, and again, historical events that changed the course of history. So, what does this kind of all, have in common? What does this all sort of boil down to? Well, it's like as if you took, echoes of the Russian Revolution and then subsequently the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Soviet Union, and you overlap them with events like the American Civil War and the Protestant rise of the Protestant Reformation and the schism between the Church of England and the Catholic Church in Rome. So we can see that we can draw various different historical parallels to what we're going through now. We can see why this is so complex. We don't really know what it all means yet because Neptune just crossed into Aries last week. This is a process that's going to go all the way into next year. And then we have another Saturn Neptune conjunction The exact Saturn Neptune conjunction, which is going to be in February of 2026. So this is a process, okay, that's just really starting. Now, if we go, if we go all the way up to February of next year, we can see that conjunction. So the conjunction this year gets within about 13 minutes of a degree in June, between Saturn and Neptune, but the exact one we have to go to February of next year. And that is going to be, you can see right here in late January, they're still both in Pisces. But if we skip ahead a week, then Neptune goes into Pisces and then Saturn goes into Pisces. And then they're going to form the exact conjunction here, uh, right around here, right around that would be the between the second and the third week of February. Okay, so this is all kind of building up to this conjunction here in February of 2026. So, this epic realignment reset process that we're going into, that clearly has to do with Donald Trump and Elon Musk and the whole MAGA takeover of American politics and Trump's, basically schism with with the status quo sort of globalism, the global trade order. So we can say uh, that there were the American Civil War was a schism, a breakdown between the Confederates and the Union. The events of King Henry VIII in 1533, that was a schism also. It was a break of the status quo. It was a challenge to the status quo power structure. And Donald Trump's tariff policies are a break with the status quo of the global economy and the global trade network. And so, we are entering into a new period of very, very chaotic. But I will say that, for example, out of the chaos of the collapse of the Berlin Wall came the reunification of Germany, which was a positive thing for Europe. And really the falling of the Iron Curtain and the integration of Eastern Europe and Western Europe together. The fall of the Yugoslavia, for example, that was a bloody civil war. But then you ended up with a lot of those former Soviet republics are now part of NATO. They're now part of the Western Alliance. And it was a more unification of East and West Europe. Uh, After the Civil War, the bloody nightmare, 4 or 5 years of the Civil War, you did get the abolition of slavery. So there were periods of chaos, but they led to positive events. We're just going into that period of chaos, and we don't know how this is going to shape up. But I would just say that I don't think Trump is going to be on the right side of history here. Uh, you can't take a 20th or 19th century playbook and try to use it for the 21st century globalized economy. Uh, the cooperation between trading partners across the world is crucial to economic prosperity to all. I think that Donald Trump is resisting the natural historical narrative of the integrated global economy. And I don't think that that's going to play out well in the long run, but that's just my opinion. So I hope that puts a little bit of historical context. Now, it doesn't tell us what's going to happen next. Looking back at historical astrological narratives for comparison, it's not going to repeat, in the same way. We saw religious battles, ideological battles. We saw actual, combat war, shooting wars in the American Civil War. We saw the collapse of empires and the rise and big changes across Europe. So, what we can say is that we are going into a period of massive historical change that correlates with these other periods of historical changes. Okay, that much we know for sure. How it's all going to land and what's going to come out of it, that one we have to just let play out. This is going to take really several years to really shake out. But we are entering into a new era. And it is that lineup of the 165-year Neptune cycle, Neptune zodiac cycle, the Saturn 29-year zodiac cycle, and the Saturn Neptune conjunction 35-year aspect cycle. Right. So this is why it feels so complex, and this is why it's so hard to say exactly what's going on and where this is all leading, because we're going into uncharted territory. So we're going to try to figure it out. We're going to keep watching the stars and the planets. I just wanted to give you the big picture update for the next couple of months. And this is starting that process that ultimately leads up to that conjunction at zero Aries in February 2026. And that's the main event, folks. So all of this is the prelude. All of this is the prelude to the main event of that conjunction between Saturn and Neptune at zero Aries in the mid-February of 2026. That's going to really tell us, that's the really time frame that we're looking at for the major new reset to really start to take shape. So we haven't even just, we're barely just getting started with this. Uh, and obviously, we're in a period of enormous turmoil in the financial markets. I've got a webinar event coming up for April 19th, and I'm bringing in some help this time. This is so complex that I'm bringing in a guest astrologer, Marsilio Musings, who I work with on Twitter. He's a very talented financial astrologer. And he's going to join us for this webinar event on April 19th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. I'm going to put the registration link in the video description and in the comments. So please check that out and join us for this event. It's going to be a 2.5 to 3 hour event. We're going to talk about the financial correlations right now for the markets, for stocks and crypto. Where are stock markets and crypto headed? Is this a buying opportunity, or do we need to be really cautious here and hold off for now? We're also going to look at the big picture going into the end of the year. With some of these major alignments that we've talked about. So yeah, please join us for this. I'm going to make an hour and a half presentation. Marsilio is going to do a half an hour presentation, and then we're going to have a discussion. Right now, the price is $95 for this, and the registration is live. So I hope you can join us for April 19th. Thanks for joining me on my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. I'm trying to break 4,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I'll try to put something together next week or in the next couple of weeks. Take care, everybody. And you know, this is going to be a challenging period. I hope that this information is helpful for you. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.